Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you to the Burke County Board of Commissioners regular meeting for Tuesday, April 20th, 2021 at 6 p.m. All commissioners are present, along with our county manager, attorney, finance officer, and our clerk tonight is absent. And in her absence, we appreciate Lance taking care of our minutes for us tonight. So let me ask you at this time to be sure to silence any mobile devices. If you have devices that are going to make a noise, please take care of that at this time. And I would remind speakers to activate microphones. If you come to the podium to speak tonight, we have provided there for your use some sanitizing wipes. If you'd like to use those, please do that as you come and go from the podium if you like. Be sure to have the microphone on so that we can hear you clearly. Thank you for adhering to COVID measures as much as we possibly can. And with that, we're glad to have tonight with us Reverend Dr. Wayne A. Johnson, Sr., the Shiloh AME Church, to bring our invocation. Pastor, if you'll come forward, and following his invocation, our County Attorney J.R. Simpson will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's stand together, please.
May we pray. In times like these, we need an anchor. And we have come because we realize, Divine Creator, you are that anchor. We thank you for your grace and for your mercy that has brought us to this day, to this hour. You are the God of our weary years, the God of our silent tears. You, Divine Creator, are the one who has brought us thus far by thy might. We would, in this moment, ask for your continual guidance. In this moment, we would ask that we would be reminded of the prayer of Francis of Assisi. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us show love. We pray for the world in which we live. We pray for these United States that at times seems to be so divided. But help us to remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., that we hope that we would live in a world where we will not be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. So we pray that you would let in these hallowed halls, let justice roll down, let justice prevail. Have your way in our lives and make Burke County a better place to reside, because we acknowledge you as our sovereign creator. This we ask in the name above all names. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the facing of this hour. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor.
Please join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this brings us to item number 4 of our agenda tonight, approval of agenda. Gentlemen, you've had this agenda for a number of days. I'll entertain a motion at this time to approve the agenda.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Wayne. Gentlemen, you've heard this motion. All those in favor, please signify by the uplifted hand. Opposed likewise. That'll be 5-0. Item number 5 on our agenda, approval of meeting minutes. You have before us tonight February 16, 2021, Board of Commissioners regular meeting. March the 2nd, 2021, Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting. March the 9th, 2021, Board of Commissioners special meeting. March the 16th, 2021, Board of Commissioners regular meeting. I hope you've had a chance to look at those minutes, and I will entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I reviewed those minutes twice. I did have a question, had a conversation with J.R. Simpson, and resolved that. So if there's no correction, I'll make the motion that we approve all four as rendered.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Taylor. If you will, pull that a little bit closer to you, please, sir. Thank you. Gentlemen, you've heard the motion by Commissioner Taylor. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That's all of us. Thank you very much. We have one item of presentation tonight. This item comes from Charter Communications. It's an update on FCC Rural Digital Opportunity Fund awards, and this will be presented by Mr. Mike Tank with Charter Communications, Director of Government Affairs. Mr. Tank, nice to have you with us tonight. Thank you.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. I see you have a full agenda, so I'll try to be as brief as possible, but I still want to be as thorough as possible. So I will run through this, but please interrupt me or feel free to ask questions as we move forward. I think they're going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation. Oh, there we go. I'm here to talk about the RDOF, or the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. This is a program that's put together by the FCC, and the idea is to address unserved areas of the country that, without broadband. And what they had to do is look at, well, the economics of expanding broadband to rural areas is tough. We know that it's all a matter of density, and as you build in rural, more urban areas, such as the town here, there's much more, the density is much closer. And when you get out into rural areas, the construction costs and the return is it's much tougher, shall we just say, from a business standpoint. So the FCC decided they wanted to help expand this to move it forward. So they came up with a program to reach out into rural, unserved areas. And the way they did that is by looking at census blocks that have no broadband available in those census blocks. And when, according to the FCC definition, is if that census block has 1 to 5 homes or residents within that census block that can get broadband, it is not eligible for the RDOF program. So the areas that we're talking about are completely census blocks with no broadband service. And according to the FCC, the definition of broadband service is 25 megabits down and 3 megabits up. So what we're doing is looking at those areas. Charter Communications was very aggressive in going after these across the country and across the state. And in doing that, the way we did that was through what was called a reverse auction. And the way a reverse auction worked is that we would look at these census blocks that were eligible, and we could say, for this census block, we would like to build that. And I'm going to make up some numbers more for example purposes for you to help understand that. So let's say that we were going to go to the census block and say, it's going to cost $100 to build this census block. We will contribute $60, and we want $40 from the federal government to help offset that cost. And let's say another provider said, we will do it for $50, and we want the federal government to contribute $50. So since we as Charter would ask for less funding, that $40, we would win that reverse auction. So the amount of money asking from the federal government would be the winner of the auction. So that's the way this went. And the FCC came out with the awards at the end, in early December. So then at that point in time, we had to go in and provide additional information to them. And through a quiet period, this quiet period ended at the end of January. So since then, we have been out talking about this. We've been out planning to do this. So on a nationalized basis, we as Charter won over 50, well, we won investments to where we are going to spend over 50 billion with a B dollars to do this, and we are receiving 1.2 billion from the FCC to offset that. This is going to be over 1 million locations, and the locations term is a FCC word, and when you talk about a location, we're really talking about an address, and that address could be a residence, it could be a business, it could be a church, it could be a governmental building, it could be any type of structure. So we're going to be doing over 1 million locations across the country. Then across the North Carolina, we also won over 128 locations in which we are going to be receiving $142 million from the FCC to help offset this. And you can see we were very aggressive in doing that. So any of the green areas on this map is the areas that we won as far as RDOF areas. So now when we look at Burke County specifically, this is the area that we won. The areas in green, also identified as CCO Holdings, that's the name we bid under, but that is Charter Communications. These are the areas of the county that we'll be building out under RDOF. That includes 700 locations, and we're getting $1.7 million from the FCC to build out to these locations. The purple line on there, this is actually a screenshot from one of the websites that the FCC has to show the area. The purple line is something I did with my mouse, so it's not an exact location, but it's to give you a good representation of the county to make sure that you could make it easier to see. So as we go forward with this project, here's the way we're going to go about doing it. The RDOF is a large effort for Charter. As you can see, we're going to be doing over 1 million locations across the country, over 128,000 here in North Carolina. So we're creating a new department to work on this. We're going to be hiring over 2,000 new employees just for the RDOF effort. In this area, we're creating a region for RDOF. It's going to be based in Charlotte, and it's going to be overseeing the North and South Carolina areas. So the initial steps that we're going through right now, since we've been awarded these areas, when we made the bids, we did it over GIS maps, and we did it through other mapping sources, knowing where our existing plant was and where we could provide service. We did not go out and put boots on the ground and walk every inch and every mile of this out across the country. So we now, as we're establishing this department, the next step is for us to go out and do this walkout, is what we call it. We walk it out to see how we go about doing it and how we're going to build it. In the construction phase, we're going to be looking at, one of the things that we look at is we prefer to go aerial as opposed to underground. It's less expensive to go aerial, but one of the factors in doing that is making attachments to poles. When we make attachments, we have to make sure that we're in compliance with NESC, National Electrical Safety Codes. And that means that when we place our lines on these poles, we're so many feet below the power and so many inches or feet above anybody else that's on that pole. That way we're being safe and making sure we're in compliance. Now we know when a lot of these poles are put together 20, 30, 40 or more years ago, they weren't necessarily put out there for multiple users. They were put out there initially primarily for power companies. So many of these poles, a lot of these poles, aren't really ready to accept another provider. So there's a term called make ready. We got to make these poles ready for us to be able to attach to them. So in doing that, that could be just moving some lines to make sure there's room for us, or in other cases, if the poles aren't large enough to be able to hold the weight and the wind loading and all those factors, or if it's older, we have to have the pole replaced. So we'll work with the pole owners to do this. So that's one of the factors in moving forward, and it's also going to be a time factor plus a cost factor in doing that. So when we do that, that's part of our walkout. We'll be doing that design. We'll go out and look at these areas that we're going to provide service to. So one of the questions I get is, when we do this, what's that service going to look like? What's it going to be? Is it going to be a wireless service, or is it going to be fiber, or whatever? Well, we are going to be providing a hard line service to every home that we build. So that could be a coax, or it could be fiber. Traditionally here, like in Morganton, in other areas that are serviced, you generally have a fiber going to a node, and then from there it's coaxial into the home. But a lot of the work that we've been doing recently has been fiber to the home. The technology has changed over the years, and we are doing more of that. So to tell you exactly on these 700 locations that we're going to be building, which way is it going to be, I can't tell you tonight, because until we go out there and do the walkout, until we do the design, until we do all those type of things, we won't know. But it will be a hardline connection, and we will be providing good quality levels of speed. Speaking of good qualities and levels of speed, the other question is, what kind of services will they be getting? They will be getting everything that we offer throughout the Carolinas. So our standard level of speed is 200 megabits per second for the standard. We also offer up to a gigabit worth of service, or 940 megabits per second. So those will be all available to everybody. We do also offer what we call the Spectrum Internet Assist program for somebody that has a hard time with that may not be able to afford some of those services. So we do offer a low-cost service that's 35 megabits per second for $17.99 a month. Now, a person would have to qualify for that. I handed each of you, or had a packet handed out to you. In there is a sheet that talks about the Spectrum Internet Assist program, so I can provide more details about it. And there's a website that you can go to find out more about it. But we will be providing hardline service with megabit or up to a gigabit service, but our standard will be 200 megabits per second. In addition to that, they'll have the full array of video services that we offer with premium services, on demand, and so on. We'll also be offering phone, VoIP, voice over internet protocol, and also our mobile phone service. So the timeline in doing this is we are required under the FCC to have this done under a 6-year window. So I want to set realistic expectations. Because this is a big project for us, we're hiring these new folks, we're doing this walkout, we got to do this design, we've got to do the make ready, and so on. It's going to take a little while to get this project rolling. We plan to do this as quickly as possible. We are obligated under the FCC on a statewide basis after the year 3 to have 40% completed, and then every year after that, an additional 20% up till year 6, in which we have to be completed 100%. We hope to be able to beat that, and there are other factors such as the make ready, how quickly we can go out and do it. Is it clean running? Be honest with you, we're going to be picking the low-hanging fruit, the easy ones first. And to tell you exactly where you guys fall in that list, I can't sit here and tell you today, because honestly, we just don't know. But those are some of the factors that we are certainly aware of. So I provided you some website links to help you understand this more at your convenience. The first one there, and this sheet is also in the packet that I handed out to you. The top one there is the main FCC website. They'll provide more information about the RDOF program. The second link provides about the wards on a per state and per county basis, so you can go to that. The third one and the fourth one are 2 FCC maps, and these are actually pretty nice maps. The first one is the official FCC, and the second one is a secondary one, CNS, which is a third-party company, Cooperative Network Systems. And in both of these, it's interactive, so you can actually go in there and plug a specific address. So if somebody is interested to say, am I in that RDOF area or not, they can go in and plug their address and it will tell them. If it comes up in a colored area, such as that green as you were seeing earlier, you were seeing it'd be one of ours, or it could be somebody else that won an RDOF as well. The other three below are Charter Spectrum locations. The first one is for a press release that we issued at the time that RDOFs were granted. Second one is a blog article that talks about some of the things that we're doing. And the third one is actually where we will be directing customers when they inquire to us about, I find that I'm in an RDOF area, when can I expect it, or how can I get additional information? This is a website that we set up where they can go in there, to that in there, they can enter their address, and then they will be getting emails from us periodically based upon how we are progressing and to keep them informed of what's going on. So here's my contact information. Each of you have a business card of mine that's in that portfolio of information. I'm happy to entertain any questions you may have this evening, or down the road as you have questions, you have my information. Feel free to reach out to me at any time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tank. Gentlemen, you've heard this information. Any questions for Mr. Tank at this time?
Mr. Chairman? Yes, I do. I just wonder where you've been. We've been waiting on somebody like you for a long while. I had 3 questions. You answered two of them in your presentation. I asked the question of how much this was going to cost the customer, and you said $17.99, I believe it's.
Now, I don't want to mislead you on that. That is a low-cost option that we have that people have to qualify. To qualify for that, it has to be a homeowner that is currently not on Spectrum Cable, and they have to have a child or a family member that's on free or reduced lunches, or a senior that's on SSI. Those are the qualifications to participate in that program. Otherwise, there are other programs and packages and different things to get our different levels of service.
So it is somewhat a valid question. The average cost, could you break that down a little bit?
You know, I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the county manager and a few of the other folks, and they had asked me that same question, and it's a very, very tough question to answer because everything is based upon bundles, based upon level of service you want, whether you want video, you don't want video, what level of service you want on broadband or internet services. Do you want to add phone? Do you not want to add phone? And if you want to put those together, you'll get a discounted rate through bundles and other promotional offers. There is not a good answer, and that changes month to month with the offers and promotions. I wish I could give you an answer to that. I just don't really. It wouldn't be fair, and I'd just be speculating.
So the low, it's fair to say that the low is $17.99, and the rest depends on how many goodies you want to buy.
Exactly. And you can go to our website, spectrum.com, and you can plug in your zip code, and it will tell you what's available in your market. So you can look at, if you're interested in what the costs are going to be, they can look at it online and find out. But the best way is to call one of our customer service reps, and they'll be happy to walk through the options and tell them.
Okay, the other question is a little selfish. I wanted to know and ask you, what's this mean to Burke County? How many customers will we serve in, say, our Burke County?
Well, what we're doing through the RDOF program, that's going to be 700 new addresses. Now, whether all of them take them or all of them don't take it, I can't answer that because that's their individual choice. But we will be going by or passing all these locations and giving them the opportunity to subscribe. So it'll be 700 new residents that have the opportunity to subscribe to that service.
Okay, again, glad you're here. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir. Mike, if we wanted to, would you mind if we put your presentation up on our Facebook page for folks that might want to be able to use those website links?
All the information on here is public information.
I'm just wanting to get it out as best I can and we have a lot of people look at our Facebook page. It might be helpful.
Sure.
Any other questions for Mike? Mike, is it your intent to to build the facility even if you do the walkout and you don't find anybody that wants the service? What's the plan?
The walkout is to do an engineering service study. It's not to go out and do pre-sale solicitation. So we probably will not be talking to the customers as we're doing this walkout. What we're going to be looking at is more from an engineering standpoint to make sure, how are we going to do this? What poles do we need to attach? What make ready is going to be necessary? If we can't do it, if there's not a pole line, do we have to go underground? How do we go about doing that and creating the design? So it's not necessarily a factor of going out and touching base with the residents there to see if they're willing to subscribe or not. So I hope that answered your question or not. So
So you could build some facility and get no customers.
that is correct. That is correct.
All right, seeing no other customers, thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for sharing this information.
Thank you.
I'll accept a motion to receive this report.
So moved.
Thank you, Wayne. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That's all it is. All right, we have a number of scheduled public hearings tonight. Our first one is consideration of exceptions to performance requirements in a dig agreement with Morganton Lodging Associates, LP, and public hearing. This is going to be presented by David Bennett and or Mike Crenn of Morganton Lodging. Guys, come on forward and we'll hear you at this time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Carry on.
Perfect. Here's to recap and also discuss the development incentive grant given to Morganton Lodging for the Fairfield Inn and Suites by Marriott downtown. That agreement was entered into in 2018. We entered into that with certain estimates that were from us as far as what we were looking to achieve from the property. So just to review those real fast, we were looking for 85 guest rooms, which we did end up building. The estimate for square feet was 50,000 square feet. It was actually just under 51,000 square feet. The total investment was estimated at $12.5 million. It was actually closer to $12.7 million. And the estimated completion date was in December 31st, 2019. We actually received, it's a 4-story building, so we received the temporary CO or occupancy on mid-December in 19. We were not able to open until late February?
We opened, we opened actually in March, but we had our certificate of occupancy on February 20th.
And with 2019 being one of our worst years on record for rain, we went back and looked at, we had 93 NOAA-approved weather delays prior to being under roof during construction, which obviously hampered the process of that. But beside that, we were 2 months late on the completion. And so with that being said, I understand that you have some questions for us as far as our ability to comply with the agreement and also with the covenants that were in the agreement. So we're here to answer any questions you have and go from there.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Gentlemen, you've heard this information, and basically we did set out with the dig agreement with Morganton Lodging, and because a few of the factors involved in that agreement were not met because of COVID and these weather delays and other things, we believed it was necessary to dot all the i's and cross the t's with the agreement to come back and approve these items as exceptions. So you see on the chart here what the dig agreement initially set out to do, and then you see in the actual column how things turned out. And the decision tonight basically is to accept or not accept those actual findings and move forward with this dig grant. So any questions at this time for these guys before I open the public hearing? Seeing no questions, one at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item from the public? Hearing and seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and entertain that motion at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I think most of us got our questions answered at pre-agenda, and sometimes you can't always plan for accidents and sicknesses and stuff like COVID. So I make the motion to approve an exception to the project completion requirements as set forth in the DIG agreement for grant year 2020 for Morgan Lodging Associates LP. Also approve an exception to the DIG job creation requirements for grant year 2020 for Morgan Lodging Associates LP.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Gentlemen, you've heard Commissioner Taylor's motion. All those in favor, please signify by the uplifted hand. And Lance, that's 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us tonight and making this presentation.
Thank you.
This brings us to item number 2, Community Development Amendment Request to Ordinance 2018-16 and public hearing. This will be presented by Peter Minner, our Planning and Zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Board. This is a request from Ed Jolly, who's associated with WSVM Radio, to amend the original approval that was granted December 18, 2018. That was part of ZMA 2018-07. In that conditional rezoning for property ID 2733063442. The rezoning request was to change the zoning from low-density conservation district to the planned residential mixed-use conditional district. And as part of that conditional rezoning, there was also a request to establish a communications tower for the radio station. During that meeting and deliberation, there were several conditions that were placed on the approval of that conditional rezoning. One of those conditions was that the maximum height of the tower would be 100 feet tall, and that was actually the height that was submitted by the applicant at the time. Several years have gone by. The tower hasn't been erected yet, and the radio station has come back to make a request for an amendment to the original approval, asking the board's consideration to grant a height increase to 150 feet rather than the original 100 feet. They also will request to relocate the tower a little bit. The property, since the original approval, has been subdivided, and so that has caused a need for a little bit of adjustment on the location. So that is what we're looking at tonight, an amendment to ordinance 2018-16. And so as I mentioned, the increase of 50 feet would be an actual 50% increase in the height of the tower. This request did not have to go before the planning board because this is an amendment to the condition of the approval, not the rezoning itself. So there was no prior public hearing or meeting on that. So that's the request before you tonight, to increase the height by 50 feet on the original approval and to relocate the tower a little bit. When they submit a new site plan, that will all be represented on that plan if this is approved.
All right, thank you, Pete. Gentlemen, you've heard this information. Any questions for Pete before I open the public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, just one, Pete, I was wondering if you've got any research from the engineer on that tower, how much that additional height will deliver his signal, to what percentage it should. That 50% higher should give him at least double the area of coverage that he would have had at 100 feet.
I haven't received any documentation, but in talking with the applicant, part of the request has to do with the new FCC approval to allow for HD radio for that station. And in order to get that HD radio signal out in a better way, that height was needed. So I haven't seen any specifics on what that height will do, but that's what was explained to me.
That's the only question I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other questions? Hearing none, at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Do we have anyone here to speak to this matter? Seeing and hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on this item.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt order number 2021-02, amending order number 2018-16 as it relates to ZMA 2018-07 and approve the related statement of consistency. To approve the statement of consistency, the proposed alteration of ZMA 2018-07 is justified because of the alternation would not adversely affect the surrounding area or hinder the tower from meeting the standards of the original approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Gentlemen, you've heard this motion. All those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. And Lance, that's 5-0. Thank you, Pete. Brings us to item number 3, also from Community Development, Zoning Map Amendment, ZMA 2021-01, and public hearing. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to restate this is zoning map amendment 2021-01. The request is from Patrick and Jacqueline Welsh to rezone a 2.29 acre property that they own and reside at from the current zoning district of office institutional to the residential 2 zoning district. If I give you a little background here, in 2014, this property and about 2,000 other properties were part of the city of Morganton's extraterritorial jurisdiction. At that time, the city wanted to relinquish those parcels, and in doing so, the county would have to accept them and rezone them to match county zoning. So at that time, the city worked with the county on the rezoning of those parcels, and it was the city actually that sought the districts for those parcels because they wanted them to match as closely as possible the existing zoning that was already in place and to match up with the zoning that they were continuing to keep there. So the county, the city relinquished those parcels at public hearing. The county subsequently had a meeting to accept those parcels and accept the rezoning. So this particular property, for the record, is PIN number 270-296-6923. The parcel is located at 606 Old NC 18, Morganton, North Carolina. And as I mentioned, it's about 2.29 acres. The surrounding area is primarily residential in nature. However, the reason that the city had that area zoned office institutional is because on one side of the subject property is a health care facility. On the other side of the property is the church. So those two land uses fit into the office institutional district. The little residential piece was kind of sandwiched in between, and I believe the city actually had that little piece zoned residential, but because there were so many parcels being rezoned at the time, every parcel wasn't looked at as closely to parcel by parcel, so they zoned the area to the office institutional, and that took in that one parcel as well. And so it was zoned office institutional, and when that happened, it actually became a non-conforming use because it was a residential dwelling, and the residential dwelling wouldn't normally be in office institutional district. So recently the applicants was working with a lender on that property to take advantage of some low interest rates, and the lender denied the application because of the zoning of the property. They couldn't make a residential loan on property that wasn't zoned residential. So that's the basis for the rezoning request tonight. And as I mentioned, a good portion of the area is zoned residential, and the R2 district is the most closest to county zoning to that property. That's why the request is for that same R2 district. This would be in compliance with the comprehensive land use plan. This being a second growth area that allows for residential uses as well as other uses as well. This rezoning, if approved, would actually bring the property into compliance with the zoning ordinance, as it would be zoned residential like its current use. So it would have that advantage as well. The planning board took up this matter on March 25th, 2021, and heard this case, asked for public comment. There was no one from the public to speak for or against the request, so the planning board unanimously voted 6-0 to approve the rezoning request. Staff also believes that this is appropriate, request is appropriate, and also is in favor of that rezoning as well. So that's the request. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
All right, thank you, Pete. Gentlemen, any questions for Pete on this matter before I open the public hearing? Hearing none, at this time I'll open the public hearing. Do we have anyone here tonight to speak to this matter? Seeing and hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 2021-03 regarding ZMA 2021-01 and the following statement of consistency and rationale for our decision. The Burke County Board of Commissioners recommends approval of the proposed rezoning request because the proposed zoning reclassification is consistent with the purposes, goals, objectives, and policies of the adopted land use plan and other plans for the physical development of the county as adopted by the Board of Commissioners. And further, the proposed zoning reclassification is compatible with the overall character of existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. And the rationale for our decision is that rezoning the property to the residential 2 district would be consistent with the existing use of the land and the structures. Rezoning the property to the R2 district would correct the existing non-conforming use of land and bring the property into compliance with the zoning ordinance.
Thank you, Commissioner Cardinal. Gentlemen, you've heard this motion. All those in favor, please signify by the uplifted hand. And that is 5-0. Thank you, Pete. All right, this brings us to item number 4 and the public hearings. This item comes from Western Piedmont Council of Governments grant, CDBG Water Project 16-2914, closeout public hearing number 2. And we'll hear that tonight from
Thank you.
Aaron, and I messed up your name last time, and
That's
it's not
okay.
coming to
You
me.
can just skip it. Aaron Shoddy.
Johnny, okay, thank you.
So I am here to review the scope of the Roney Road and Highway 18 South waterline project that was funded by federal CDBG dollars. And we're required to hold a public hearing to close out that project. This, again, is this is the same project that we finished up back around November of last year. So the project was awarded a $2 million grant by the Division of Water Infrastructure in NCDEQ. And this project extended 18,870 linear feet of new water line on Highway 18 South, connecting dead-end lines, and another 12,130 linear feet of new water line on Roney Road, connecting to Old NC South. Prior to this project, homes in the area were served by rock wells with low yields, and water was high in iron, manganese, and hydrogen sulfide. Other homes were served by springs with varying water yields contingent on precipitation. Income surveys were conducted for each of the 42 occupied households within the project area, and the total water project benefit was to 64.7% low to moderate income individuals. In addition to that, the project provided a 100% low to moderate benefit to 23 households that were connected with free water connections and meters. The project also installed 29 new hydrants and 40 new meter setters and boxes, for a total of 31,000 linear feet of 8-inch water lines, 23 new households connected, and 42 households improved with access to a new water line. There's no budgetary effect for this public hearing. The project was completed with 2 change orders, which netted a decrease of $17,000 to the construction contract. The total project came in at $2,117,943.43. And the county was responsible for that overage, over $2 million. And if anybody has any questions or comments or about the project.
Thank you, Aaron. Any questions for Aaron before I open the public comment or section? All right, hearing none, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone here tonight to speak to this matter? Seeing and hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. And with that, tonight, gentlemen, we've already acted on this item. We just needed to hold another public hearing. So with that matter conducted, this item is taken care of. This brings us now to item number 8, informal public comments. And I'll recognize Lance Riddle at this time to move us into our public comment section.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We have several people who have signed up to speak for informal public comments. The first person I would call upon is Carol Urban.
All right, thank you, Lance. And I would ask each of you as you come forward tonight, please state your name and address. And I'll remind you that we have 3 minutes for public comments. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Carol Irwin Largent. I live at 429 Balst Road here in Morganton, North Carolina. And I'm here to make a few comments about the Confederate monument on the courthouse square. The Confederate monument was erected as a commemoration, and to commemorate means to mark an event or to honor a person or people. As we all know, God has called us to all be brothers and sisters in Christ and to love one another in Christ, as Christ loved us. I've been here all my life. I've worked here all my life, went to school here, raised children here. I know a lot of people in this community. And I'm pretty sure I probably know somebody, I've communicated with somebody who has some issue or has an individual or knows an individual who's part of the monument. But because I love them, that love runs in it a vein of respect. And I respect the fact that they have people there that they honor and they adore, just like I honor and adore my mother who's buried on the other side of town, and I have a monument for her there. So to me, that means the same thing. It doesn't mean anything different. But with the monument uptown, it's two different things. It's two things. You've got the people issue, which is a totally different issue to me than the monument itself. The monument itself stands for something totally different. And I don't have to stand here, I don't think, to explain what that is, but to know that those events don't mean anything close to righteousness, which God is to us, and love, which God is to us, to me. So I'm very concerned that the monument itself stands for two things. It stands for some people's minds, it's a bed of roses and a lovely thing. In other people's minds, it stands for hatred. It stands for something that's very ugly in our past. So I say that to mean, how can something, one thing like that, be the center of our community? How can it be a central location in our community? So one thing, Mr. Taylor, I remember a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to your comments in your pre-agenda meeting, and you said that God would not be pleased if he took away the monument. Well, there's a couple of scriptures. Psalms 97 says, "Let all be put to shame who serve carved images." And then in Deuteronomy 11 it says, "Beware that your hearts are not deceived so that you are turned away from worship to worship other things." I may or may not have voted for some of you. It doesn't really matter. You are my county commissioners, and for that I respect you. But in return, I expect you to represent me, represent people that look like me, represent people that talk like me, that may be saying some of the same things that I'm saying, just as well as you represent other people. That being said, I asked you to find some neutral ground with this in consideration of the monument. It's an object of remembrance. Objects of remembrance should be neutral, not the center of controversy in the middle of our town. Don't hide behind a law that only represents some people. Look for options and try to find some solutions. Matthew 23 says, what is good bears fruit and multiplies. What is not will wither, dry, and die. I don't want to be a member in a community that is withering, drying, and dying because we have not borne good fruit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Irvin. Next speaker.
Lynetta Williams.
How are you? As you heard, my name is Lynetta Williams, and I come to support the removal of the Confederate statue, not the destruction of it, but to move it to a different location. I have lived in Morganton all but 9 years of my life. 4 years at college, and 5 years I lived up north to get my start in my profession, education. I moved back to Morganton in 1997. Many things had changed about my hometown, but the one thing that had not changed is the unrest that surrounds that statue. As a matter of fact, I had not been home. I'd only been home a couple of years, and the Ku Klux Klan had a demonstration up there around that statue. And the worst that I have experienced in my lifetime was this past summer. After I had gotten past the shock of what happened, my mind turned to the business owners who would have been, or I believe was in, harm's way this past summer. I thought about people that I had met and got to know their children as they've come through Freedom High School. Ben and Livers, Treats, Uncle E's, Brown Mountain Bottle Works, Natural Olive, Kathy's, and the many more businesses that I had gotten to know, because I had actually taken students from Freedom to do a tour of downtown and talk to these various people about their experience in being entrepreneurs in downtown Morganton. I put faces to those folk that were downtown that I felt as a result of that which went on at the square last summer. I put faces to those people. And I'll be very honest with you. It struck me deeply. And it still does. Because those are innocent people who have poured their life's energy into making Morganton a healthy community, a better community. I mean, I've had the privilege of driving down through town and seeing people sitting out and eating and socializing. That these businesses, these folk, put their hard-earned money into building this community. And they were put in harm's way because of individuals who cared more about their rights than about the safety and well-being of our community. People who didn't even know the difference between Morgantown, Pennsylvania, and Morganton, North Carolina. Now, we're going to put aside American history because it continues to be one-sided, but we're going to look at the history of divisiveness this statute has caused from the beginning up to this very day. Last summer, we saw a tip of the danger that can come from this type of heart. I ask you as people who have been elected to serve this community and work to make Morganton a healthy place for all Morgantonians, how can you let this be?
Thank you, Ms. Sweet. Next speaker.
Claude Maines.
It's just about, first off, I'd like to say thank you for listening to what we had to say about our neighborhood. This is on Rich Creek Drive, which is Mr. Flynn. We have had a problem with him ever since he moved in. He came from Hickory or Catawba County, came up here, and they had problems with them down there just like we're having with them now. So he just transferred his way of living and bringing it up where we're at now. Problem is that he doesn't see the way we see our neighborhood. We're not the Vanderbilts by no means in our neighborhood, but we do like to keep it as clean as neat as possible. He doesn't seem to see it that way. He first moved in, he does odds and end jobs, and he would bring anything and everything into our neighborhood around his house. And within a matter of 6 months, it looked like a landfill. And people was complaining about it then, and been complaining about it ever since he'd been there for 5 years. Now, his house burnt down, and he uses the pity thing about not having insurance and all that. The house was paid for. His mother-in-law bought the house for him and gave it to him for her grandkids and her daughter. He, for some reason or other, decided he didn't want to pay insurance on it, so when it burnt down, he had no insurance. A lot of churches and everything chipped in, helped him, and it seemed like he didn't use it right. For example, he had pallets of cement that he didn't cover up, and next thing you know, it's raining, ruined. I mean, it's just on and on and on. But he does use the pity card, and we've had just about enough. I was thinking they was gonna have pictures, but I guess we don't, do we? Of the area that we lived in, his house.
Excuse me, that will be heard during his decision item a little bit later, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, well, pictures, they'll pretty much explain it, but he, well, I'm not much of a speaker, to tell the truth, and so, but anyway, we've just been having a problem with this guy ever since he's moved in. We would just like for him to go ahead and, if anything, clean his act up. He had 5 years to do it, and he never did. It looked worse after, it looked just as bad before the house was burnt down as what it did after it burnt down. Seems to me, and he keeps saying he's going to build this, he's going to do that, and keeps adding excuses. Thing is, he don't pay his taxes, he don't pay his fines and his fees. If he cannot pay for those, how can he build a house? And we all know this, we all talk about it, everybody in the neighborhood, we all kind of mingle into one another and find out what's going on. Mr. Flynn's only problem is geography. He needs to be somewhere off by itself or around people who is more like him. We are not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. Next speaker.
Robin Buchanan.
Let me remind you, please state your name and address when you come to the podium, please.
My name is Robin Buchanan, and I'm a community member on 2557 Ridge Creek Drive in Morganton. I'm here to speak against the property on Ridge Creek Drive, the property that does belong to Joy and Jerry Flynn. The first Sunday in January of 2018, the dwelling located at 2372 Ridge Creek Drive was heavily damaged by fire. Following the fire, several of the neighbors, along with several local churches, reached out to the Flynn family with assistance. It was our understanding that the Flynns were going to rebuild and that he had obtained a building permit. As time went by, there was evidence of building materials and other debris being collected at both 2372 and 2360 Ridge Creek Drive. After a period of 3+ years, the county has been contacted numerous times to verify the status and to seek assistance to have the place cleaned up. The county officials have worked with the neighbors through this process to the point of where we are tonight. It is my understanding that a condemnation hearing was held on Tuesday, March the 30th, and a 60-day demolition order was given. At that time, the deadline for demolition and cleanup was set for May the 30th, 2021. Both tracts of land are now filled with styrofoam blocks, large plastic water collection containers that are typically used on farms or commercial property, tarps of all sizes and all colors, and a large amount of trash. The styrofoam blocks are now appearing in the creeks at the back of landowners' property and in neighbors' yards. Having lived in the area for 30+ years, the neighborhood has had its issues, but never have we experienced anything of this nature. Therefore, I speak for the condemnation order to remain in place for the burnt dwelling and the demolition and cleanup to remain as of May 30th, 2021. I also petition when said property is cleared that it not be allowed to be placed on the parcel that he has a metal building, the 2360 parcel. As the two parcels join and all the debris and trash that is currently related to this condemnation is spread between both parcels. Both these tracts of land should be considered as a very infectious area for anyone to be on. Again, I'm speaking in favor of the condemnation, demolition, and cleanup of the parcels of land by May 30th, 2021, belonging to Jerry L. Flynn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. Next speaker.
Shirley Taylor.
Commissioners, thank you for allowing opinions to be heard in the subject of our Burke County Confederate statue. To a great number of our Burke County citizens, this is a matter of the history of our country, our county, and our families. Families cherish photos, medals, stories of relatives, friends who fought in this Civil War and future wars. All history contains the good, the bad, and the ugly. What is the purpose of history? To remind us of our past, our conduct, our accomplishments, and our failures. Remembering is one of the best tools in learning. History is one of the greatest inspirations to learning and improving. Both lead us to consider the good, the bad, and the ugly. Which of these do we want to keep? Which of these do we need to learn from and never repeat? The greatest history book is the Bible. Jesus used the phrase, "in remembrance of me." The dead have passed the torch on to us, the living. It's up to us to keep the good of history, the lessons learned, live and expand on them. This is what the Confederate statue means. We need reminders. We need visible reminders to keep us on the right path. If we delete our history, how many life lessons will be forgotten? How many good things will be omitted from our lives? What will be the next movement, the next part of history to be eliminated? Let Burke County stand in the gap and keep learning and history as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Next speaker, please.
Barbara Lael.
Barbara Lael. I'm from College Springs, Lindsay Road. And many of the Burke County names on the slabs that are attached to the Confederate soldier statue, many of them there. But my particular one is about Solomon Buff. He's my special care. He's listed with a lot of special people, but he's mine. Around 32 years of age, he left his hard-scrabbled South Mountain home, left it with Ann and their 3 children to fight for his new country. And there was no escaping to Canada, and he didn't have a handsome fringed sash to wear around his waist. His first battle was at Bull Run, Virginia in '61, and it was won. His next battle was at dead of winter the next year with no weapons to fight pneumonia. More men died of such army camp illnesses than on the battlefields. These dead were moved home never, but instead we do have a remembrance of their suffering and dying, but duty done. Like so many of across our land, there's a danger of this statue and any other remembrances being removed. What about the new busts that are so beautiful, so inspiring, that are around the newer courthouse? Does somebody want to take them down because they did not like our fight in World War II? A great many could say that they did. Let's not belittle what the ones that did by moving them out to a place that can't be seen. I think that it is really important that what we have now be protected, and for those who want to cause trouble about it, then don't. We don't have to have trouble with that. We don't have to have fussing. I just believe that although it's illegal right now to take the statue down or even to move it, is my understanding, but how much trouble would it take to take it down anyway? How long will it be before it becomes legal to take those things down? Because we don't like it. We have great-grandsons, and I would like one day for them to go back to that statue and see their sixth great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's name. I think it would be inspiring, and I do thank you for letting me say what I've said tonight on a very personal way. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lael. Next speaker, please.
Diana Register.
I'm Diana Register. I live at 106 Edgewood Avenue in Morganton. I am here to talk about the Confederate flags and the Confederate statue. I first want to thank you. Many of you have served on this commission for a long time, and you've done some wonderful things for Burke County, but I'm not here to just praise you for those. I'm here to tell you that you're failing us badly, and you're failing us in a way that only you can take care of. You're the only ones who can act on our behalf. You have allowed for 2 oversized Confederate flags to mark our county, and there's a name for that, and it's called a sundowner community. We're in 2021, and you're allowing people, some of whom don't even live in North Carolina, who are funding this, to mark our county as a county where only white people are welcome. And as a white person, I'm offended by that. It's not only blacks, it's not only Latinos, it's not only Asians, it affects everyone. You are allowing this to go on, and only you can do something about it. And it would be simple to do. You can amend the zoning ordinance to the I-40 corridor. We brought you a petition, it had 5,000 signatures on it, and you thanked us, but you did nothing. I know there has been conversation, and I'm going to tell you, I was appalled, and Mr. Taylor, this is really not funny. I was appalled when I heard the comments that you made, and that you made during the pre-agenda meetings about the Confederate statue and what's been done. If I wash the dishes and bring you a plate for you to eat off of, and it's got eggs on it, Johnny Carswell, is the job complete? Is that a plate you should eat off of? You have not resolved this issue, and now you have tabled it and said we've done all we need to do. God is not going to be upset with you if that statue is moved. Laws are laws. The Bible is the Bible. They're different. Laws are made by men, and they are rethunk, they are changed, they are rewritten, and they are reinterpreted. The interpretation of the law that you're saying requires you to keep the statue on the courthouse square is a very narrow interpretation. That statue, and we have 7,000 signatures on the petition, approximately 78, sounds?
Which is half.
No, 7,800?
Yeah.
7,800 signatures. So 5,000 for the flags, 7,800 for the statue, and all you've done is thank us and tell us we've done our job. We've talked about it, we've done everything we can do. Well, absolutely you have not. That statue needs to be removed. It is in commemoration of a war that said some human beings are not even human beings, and they have no rights. And it's time for it to go. It's past time for it to go. Not only are you allowing that to happen, but you're allowing people like me to take the threats that result from conversation about whether or not these things should stand. I've had death threats. The person who originated the petition for the statue has had death threats and had to basically go underground. The occurrence on the courthouse square was threatening to everyone who was in the community. The statue now presents a clear and present danger And the flags demark our county as a sundowner community, which we are not. It's time for you to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Register. Next speaker.
Eric McNaughton.
Hello, my name is Eric McNaughton. This is my wife, Catherine. We moved here to Morganton in 2009 with our 3 sons to 4515 Mount Olive Church Road. We love this community. Thank you for hearing me today. I'm here to talk about the Confederate Monument in review of the recent meetings, including the last one on April 6th when you gentlemen shared your hearts. It is clear to me that you hope to do what is right. Thank you for that. What we are dealing with here today is not participation in cancel culture, nor the national movement to remove monuments, and it certainly isn't an attempt to erase history or pretend that it doesn't exist. Instead, we are dealing with what is truth that pertains to our community right here in Morganton. That's our responsibility. What is the truth? To paraphrase one of you at the last meeting, truth is what it is. It's unmovable. I'm in full agreement with that statement. However, our interpretation of what truth is not ultimate and unmovable. But instead, as God reveals to us what is true, we have the opportunity and the obligation to reform to that understanding. Jesus said it perfectly. The law and the prophets are summed up in these 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And once you realize that for all the good things that this monument stands for, like have been addressed today, for states' rights to protect themselves from the federal government, for the meaningfulness of these men who gave their lives for the First and Second Amendment, of which are all very meaningful, it also symbolizes the militant attempt to maintain oppression of fellow men. That is an unescapable fact. It's not interpretation. And it's not imagination, as sadly was suggested last meeting. The truth that we face together with you is that maintaining a symbol of oppression right in our public square is wrong. And it's not loving our neighbor. Where am I at? We now have the opportunity to reform to what the truth is. And as Martin Luther King Jr. showed, and as Jesus Christ said, it is our duty to reform, whether it be our laws or our customs, to allow for God's truth to be what we actually uphold. And that is why I support the removal of the monument from the public square, regardless of what obstacles face us or you as commissioners. With the understanding of truth we now have about loving our neighbor that perhaps our ancestors did not fully understand. Please consider facilitating this opportunity to remove this monument from the public space. God bless you, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. McNaughton. Next speaker.
Malachi Pearson.
Sorry. My name is Malachi Pearson, 514 Rocky Ford Street. I started the protesting here in Morganton last year. I also had the petition dropped down to me, so I have full command over it, which has 78,000 signatures. I'd like to say, I see you over there smiling. Last year, when everybody was up there on that monument, huddled with guns, they were telling a little black girl that she couldn't join them. They were saying, you can't be here. You can't be near here. That's why everybody started gathering. That's why the public safety had to call the state troopers, the sheriffs, everybody to come up around what was going on, because they all heard this white lady tell this little black girl in the N-word, and it's all, we got it all on video, that she can't be here. Go home, eat row. That's what she said. If you guys can't handle it, It's 2021. We live in America. My rights let me handle it. And so does everybody else's that live here. I get it's your heritage. I love the South. I come from Colorado. I didn't know love until I came down here. The love that you guys grew up in, you showed me that. I learned it. I inherited it, and I exerted it to other people. But when I got people defending a statue that still supports racism, no matter how much you guys say it doesn't, it still supports it, I have to deal with it. I have people telling me that they were going to kill me if I would get that statue removed. I can show you the messages. Turn this into a whole case. Make it all go viral. I got the video of the people saying that a Negro can't be up on the courthouse while they're protesting because they got a permit. Okay, well, what about my rights? How far do we have to go with this? How loud do we have to get? You think George Floyd was loud? They're hooting and hollering because of racism. That right there is concentrated racism. And you had racist people defending it. You say, that's our heritage. It wasn't for slavery. My whole bloodline comes from the Conway Plantation. You want to talk about racism and heritage, Berrytown, that's all my family. We can all go into it. I'm not from here. When I moved here when I was 18, I got pulled over by the cops. 2 white girls in the front, 1 black dude in the back. They walked past them, right on the window. Why didn't you ask for their IDs? No, we want yours. They walked right past them again to their cars. Didn't say nothing to them. They looked at each other. Didn't know what else happened. I was 18. I didn't even know racism existed. They came back, handed me my ID, told me I needed to get a North Carolina ID. And they left on. Tell me racism don't exist here. And I promise you, out of all 363 million people in this country will know. They sit here, a lot of stuff is coming. It's 2021. It's not a threat, it's reality, it's the truth. That's all I gotta say. Get it handled, get it removed before other people get it removed for you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Next speaker, please.
Lee Flynn.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Lee Flynn. Yes, I am the owner of the house on what's left of it on 2372 Ridge Creek Drive. But I have pictures of what these so-called neighbors are saying that's wrong with the house. I do admit I have been working on it for some time now, but when you work for yourself, and especially when you, I guess you say a lot of hands-on, you don't have equipment, you do it the old-fashioned way, you don't make a whole lot of money, and you don't have a whole lot of time on your hands. I have worked relentlessly, going for at least a couple of weekends out of each month, sometimes longer than that. And I have built back one of the structures almost completely. But the virus hit last year, my business suffered tremendously. And the water tanks that they're talking about, they didn't mention why I built a gate out of those things. Lonnie Ray Smith came onto my property, threatened me, communicated threats. I had to take him to court. It's documented. The Mains, who are across from me, I had to put up a 10-foot fence because they had code enforcement called out there relentlessly. You can look back at the records and see how many times they have been called. I live in Newton, inherited a house from taking care of my mother-in-law for 10 years who died of cancer in 2018. The money that she did give us, yes, she did, but it was my wife's inheritance when her dad passed. And therefore, we lost everything on January 2018. And yes, some churches did help, but it wasn't a whole lot. It was $2,500. And I don't know about y'all, but it's pretty hard to build a house back with $2,500. And I have tried to go up there and get as much done as I can, but the strangest thing about it is that when I'm gone for weeks at a time, trying to do work down in Newton and wherever else that I may have to go to do this, pressure washing, tree cutting, whatever it may be. Come back it's so convenient the stuff's been exposed. And what gets me is that how Mr. Main can know about my concrete situation when my whole entire perimeter of my property is closed. They always seem to know what's going on. But code enforcement never asks, how can you see behind the fence? How can you see behind a 10-foot fence I had to put up? Went to Williams Sawmill in order to get protection from these psychos that live on my road. I had printed a newsletter that I'd been passed out. I hadn't put any names of any of these people that's coming against me, which I've known for some time. I've had to call Burke County deputies out there about 3 times for people to come by trying to cuss me, trying to start a fight, putting up tarps in order to keep people from seeing me. And I finally figured out the IBC tanks was my answer because it don't blow up in the wind. You can't see what you're doing. You can't move it unless you come on the property. And, you know, I'm not trying to make their so-called neighborhood a wreck, as they put it, horribly. When I first moved there in 2015, I do the old-fashioned thing. I use wood. That's one reason why we couldn't get an insurance policy, because we had wood. The unit inside of the house, when we bought it on an auction site, we couldn't fix it. We didn't find that out until later, because it was as is and no inspection when you go to Hubsu and get an auction. But, you know, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to get back in my property, but, you know, these people keep using county officials to keep trying to keep me from it and harass me with them, and therefore. But if you want to see pictures of what it looks like now, my phone got broke, but I have the pictures. I can't print them. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Next speaker.
Mr. Chairman, that's all the cards and folks who have pre-registered to speak that I have.
Do we have anybody else here tonight that would like to make public comment? Seeing no one else, thank you all for making your comments tonight. We appreciate them. And at this time, we'll move on to our consent agenda, and I'll recognize our county manager for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, you have 6 items on your consent agenda. Number 1, BOC, opposition to increased access to marijuana through decriminalization of potential legalization. Item 2, BOC, Public Health Month proclamation. Item 3, clerk, appointment to Library Board of Trustees. Item 4, county manager, proclamation declaring May 6, 2021 as National Day of Prayer. Item 5, tax department, tax collection report for March 2021. And item 6, tax department release refund report for March 2021. That concludes your consent agenda.
Thank you, Brian, for that. Gentlemen, you've heard the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion for its approval.
So, Mr. Chairman. I was going to suggest, as the board, to maybe consider, I am so pleased with the National Day proclamation of prayer, and if we could send that to all the churches, that this board took that action. And I don't think we need to vote for that now, but somewhere between now and the next few days, if we could get a consensus, and if we were in agreement to do that.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Taylor. I believe we have a motion from Wayne. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That's all of us. The consent agenda will stand approved. Item number 10 tonight, items for decision, comes from Community Development Condemnation Appeal Case 072-19. This will be presented by Bradley Kirkley, our zoning administrator. Bradley, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As has been mentioned, included within your packet, staff report. Present with me tonight is the Chief Building Official, Steve Holden. To summarize, 2372 Ridge Creek Drive is the property in question. You've heard a couple of public comments in regards to the property, as well as from the owner himself, Mr. Flynn. Included within the packet are several photos, information. To quickly summarize the property in question, as you can see there from the screen, was partially burned. Caught fire back in 2018. Some steps and procedures led up to a recent posting of the property being unsafe. That was done so by Mr. Holden. and was done so back on March 25th. The photos that you see on the screen for you are from that date of the posting, once again, March 25th. As you can see those kind of scrolling through, you can see a various array of not only solid waste items, the damage there to the structure. If you're looking in the top right-hand corner of the photograph that you see within the screen, this is actually the back of the home. And it's important to reference here for the purpose of the unsafe posting that this is where the partial demolition had already occurred from Mr. Flynn himself. So that is the rear of the home. I also want to state for the record themselves, because of the prior issues for this property itself, these photos were not collected by me. They were collected by Deputy James Marler in conjunction with Chief Inspector Holden. So to summarize, once the property is posted as unsafe, a public hearing has to turn and be done. That was done within our office. Mr. Flynn attended that by conference call. At that, Chief Inspector Holden issued a 60-day order. From the North Carolina General Statute, 60 days is the maximum amount of time Mr. Holden can offer to them for remedy, cleanup, demo, repair, permits, whatever the order may turn and be. In this situation, it was a 60-day order expiring on May 30th of 2021 for the demolition and cleanup of the property. In conjunction with general statute, Mr. Flynn has the option to file an appeal, which he did so on April the 5th, which leads us to tonight. So for your consideration and vote, you have the option per statute to affirm the order as it's written from Mr. Holden. You can affirm and modify the order to possibly grant additional time, less than the amount of time, whatever angle you wish to do, or you can revoke the order, which would basically mean to throw the order out and the structure can stand just as it is. I'll be happy to entertain any questions. If you have anything as far as the building code side of things, I'll defer that to Mr. Holden.
All right, thank you, Bradley. Gentlemen, you've heard the information. You've had this in your package. We had some discussion at pre-agenda. Do you have any questions for Bradley or Steve at this time?
Mr. Chairman, allow me to ask one. Bradley, in lieu of getting the letter, a copy of the letter from Flynn and requesting, and in his discussion today, that he is willing to do anything you ask, how does that, where does that leave you and me on this item? I mean, is there a resolve without total demolition, or can we give him more time? I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, structurally, I would let Steve turn and answer that, at least on what you see within the photos. But to my interpretation, just as an individual looking at the photo that you see, the rear of that home is beyond repair. It's essentially now that since he started the demo that you see within the photo on the back of the home, we're kind of committed to that point. Could permits be obtained to fix it back? Could that be done to repair all of it? Yes. But it's important to know staff and a third-party individual did not put that in the manner that it is right now. That was done by the owner.
All right. Considered it's demolished, what next? Will there be instructions? Will he be forced to rebuild? Will he be able to sell the lot? What's the next step?
Well, as it was mentioned during part of the public comment, Mr. Flynn does own two properties. This property contains simply the single-family home that caught fire that is there. He also owns an adjoining property that does contain a Quonset hut. You can see a metal building located there to the bottom right photo. It is actually on a separate parcel of land. That does have its own address. However, it is an accessory building. So to my understanding, one of the things Mr. Flynn is seeking to do is to try to remove the structure here and then reestablish the Quonset hut into a livable dwelling. Can that be done? That would refer back to the building code. I don't know the structural integrity of what the building currently is, but to my understanding, that is what he's seeking to do. But it would be two separate parcels. This parcel itself, if the home was demolished, home was gone,
Nothing at all would prevent him from building a new house back if he so chose. It's a legal lot of record, has an address, has an existing septic.
One final question. You mentioned the demolishing of the property, and the bill would be passed on to the landowner, correct?
Okay, so at its current state, based on what you would turn and render a decision on tonight. So let's say the order is upheld and it is affirmed, and we're sitting on a May 30th deadline date. If nothing is turned and done on behalf of Mr. Flynn to comply with the order as it's written, staff would then have to come back before you with quotes, bids, options. What do we look to do for cleanup and remedy? Because at that point, the order would have expired. So right now, everything is pending until your decision tonight.
Well, you guessed my reason for asking that question. I wanted to know the approximate cost for the demolition if we go that route.
That is correct.
That is forthcoming.
That's right. I don't have an estimate for you with that, but yes, you're correct. If it made it to that and staff or county had to expose tax dollars to turn and do the cleanup, it would be placed in the form of a lien. It would go through the county attorney, J.R. Simpson.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on this matter? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
May I be heard? On behalf of Mr. Flynn, he's hired me to address this appeal. I'm Alan McCoy, local attorney.
Mr. Simpson, would that be appropriate?
It would. He has appealed, so he can present his case on appeal himself, or he can have counsel to do that.
All right, carry on.
Thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of Mr. Flynn, he has authorized me to come here and make an offer, which I believe this board has the ability to do, and Mr. Taylor touched on this. He has the ability to complete this within an amount of time, just not by May 31st. So he's asking me to come before this board to give him an extension of time until September 30th to get this done. It was stated earlier that under the statute, you cannot extend it beyond 60 days. Actually, the statute says you have to give them at least 60 days. So this board can give him as many days as you feel is reasonable for him to complete the demolition and removal of these materials and so forth. And so he's coming for you to ask you to do that. Now, having said that, I want to point out that the staff's process has been legally deficient in several ways. First of all, the statute that they noticed the condemnation under, Chapter 153A, is repealed. It was repealed in June of 2020. It was replaced by General Statute 160D. The notices this man has received that his property is in violation of the condemnation statute, he's noticed to have violated a statute that didn't exist when he received that notice. So we could insist that you begin the whole process over again and refer to the correct statute, which, by the way, says that they can, after the staff hearing, which they have had, which was notice under an improper statute number, that they can give no less than 60 days for it to be completed. So we're asking here in good faith, give this man until September 30th. That's modifying the staff order. We'll forget about the legal deficiencies that has happened to this point, and we can proceed with a regular order. I would just ask the order quote the correct statute, 160D, and those particular provisions. And then my client will proceed to get this done. He just needs until September 30th to do it. Otherwise, I will have no other choice but to get an injunction, which I'll be able to get because your process has been legally deficient. We don't want to do that. I just want for my client, him to have the ability, the time that he needs to get this done. He has had some substantial difficulties, as have many self-employed individuals over this past year. Financial difficulties caused by the COVID-19 coronavirus situation that has left him, a self-employed individual who does work for individuals. You can imagine his income has plummeted almost to nothing. So we would ask you to give him that time until September 30th. I think that's a good faith request that he is making to this board. And you do have the authority to do that under Chapter 160D. That chapter was passed by the North Carolina Legislature in 2019, made effective June 2020. It completely repealed 153A. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McCroy. Counselor, do you have any opinion on this right off the cuff?
160, Chapter 160D does now provide the current statute for local municipalities, including counties, to deal with demolition and condemnation. I don't think it's a fatal error that an earlier statute was referenced, although it would be a good idea to update it to what the current statute is. And the board does have the ability, Mr. Holden didn't have the ability to give him more than 60 days, but the board does have the ability to give him more than 60 days.
All right, thank you, JR. Gentlemen, any more discussion on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask one more question? Does Mr. Flynn intend to hire professionals to demolish this? It's obviously, in my mind, not a 6-month deal. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just, if we hadn't already had 2 or 3 years of history behind us, I would feel differently about that and tell you quite quickly that I would feel different. But I think and I will also make one other statement which will get me in trouble, but that's okay. I've been in trouble before, and that is that neighbors shouldn't be able to dictate to one of their other neighbors, you know, in a sense of totality, what he can do with his property. And saying that, though, they do have enough concern I'm going to say maybe neighborly abuse. And looks like he has enough concern that he has met neighborly abuse from the people who want things done. But when all else fails, you look at the law and you follow what the law says to do. And that's what our people have done. And, you know, and I think that in this instance, you know, I'd feel better about a 90-day window, not September, and because it needs to have some action on it. It's been a long time.
Yes, Mr. Taylor, I understand that. What I can tell you that Mr. Flynn has shared with me is that he does not have the money to hire a separate company to do the work, but he is getting the money to be able to rent equipment and some laborers to assist him to get this done, including, I think, of the cost of obtaining the dumpsters and so forth you'd have to get to be able to put the equipment in. He's also hopes to salvage some building materials for rebuilding on the site. But I can tell you that giving him only 90 days is setting him up to fail, in my opinion. He needs until September 30th to do this with the financial strains that he has and the course that he and I sat down and talked about and set out for him to get this done. So I would plead with the board to give this gentleman until September 30th to get this done. That's me discussing very specifically with him that this building, nobody can say was improperly condemned. It needs to be removed. He understands that, and he admits that immediately. But he is going to need till September 30th to get it done, and I plead with you to give him that amount of time. so that he can do it.
Bradley, am I correct in thinking, remembering, this has been an ongoing matter for many months, but
It has. This has been an ongoing issue stemming from neighbor reports, continued complaints, issues for what can be seen, what cannot be seen, what is the nature of the work that's ongoing. It's important to reference that in the beginning, back in 2018, after the fire happened, the only permit that we actually have details and lists for the repair of a wall. I don't really know what wall. And that's always been an argumentative thing on what's the nature of what work is looking to be done. Are we looking to be through there? The totality of all permits to turn that back into a home had never been fully pulled. They've never been pulled for electrical, for plumbing, for any of that. So at best, we've got a structural, if we look at it from there. But the scope of work through this amount of time really hasn't advanced to that point. And I do know that there's circumstances that Mr. Flynn's dealt with. I do know that, he has had situations for monetary issues, living outside of off the properties, commuting back and forth. And we've tried to do our best to accommodate those, but at the same time, we're a public office that when complaints are derived, and this is the nature of what it is, we have a responsibility to follow back on that. From staff's perspective and from looking, if it's granted and it can be met in that September time slot, we've waited 4 years. The purpose and goal for us is to relieve the trouble and the problem, and ultimately that is the nuisance issue that you're starting to see on the screen.
Commissioner, we're working now with our department, Mr. Flynn, with changing the Quonset hut into a residential dwelling and using some of that material, which he's talking to us. We're trying to deal with that, and he says he's gonna obtain those permits, which hasn't been obtained yet, but he's in the process of turning that into a house.
JR, if we were to reset the condemnation process, what time frame would that take?
Probably 90 days.
Mr. LaCroix, could we set any timelines in here to see some action happening within this time frame of September that you've requested?
As certainly, it's not my position here to talk about confidential communication with clients, but he will allow me to. I had to press him on the September 30th date because he's concerned, but we've gone through financial things. We've talked in detail about this, and that's the date that we've come up with. I pushed him to say this needs to be done by, and he says I can get it done. Short of that, I believe a 90-day process is going to be hard pressed. I don't know if going to the courthouse will give me the ability to delay it more than 90 days. I suspect it may. I don't want to have to do that. I want to come here in good faith and reach this agreement for September 30th. I've pushed my client. Now I'm trying to push you so that we don't end up having to spend time in front of a local Superior Court judge discussing this matter further and using whatever procedural rights we have to do that. September 30th is really the time that I've pressed him and gotten dragged out of him, so to speak, going specifically through some financial things with him and so forth. He does want me to point one thing out. Jeff just told me this. Lee just told me this. None of this from the street. He has erected a fence. You cannot see this unless you climb over the fence.
I'll have to disagree with that, Mr. LaCroix. I've been by the property.
Then I apologize for that. He's just shown me a photograph from the property. But nonetheless, I do implore for the September 30th date that the order be modified for that date.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question. Mr. LaCroix, if you might stay there for a moment, please, sir. Is it your client's intent to take everything off of that property and make it clean?
On the fire side, yes. Isn't that correct? Yes. The fire side, correct. He does want, evidently there's some materials in there he may be able to salvage and use where he wants to build a housing structure. But on the fire side, yes, every bit of that will be removed.
I guess what maybe Commissioner Carlin was getting to, there's lots of debris and other items on this property that need to be removed and cleaned up. Is it?
But you intend to remove all the other debris, is that correct?
Yes, everything but my fence. Because I have had bottles and rocks stuck in me when my son out there working. So, you know, that's for my protection. Plus, Monty Ray Smith on the other side, I got a fence up over him too. This is not shown. I have to admit it too.
So I understand from his intention, yes, is to remove all the debris. And I told him that the community would expect nothing less than that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I ask the question, has your client considered contacting the fire department and do this burn as a practice, which would certainly pick up the time, space, and get rid of the problem in a hurry?
No, but that is something we could certainly explore. And I would, I'd help him make that phone call. I think that would be a fantastic idea if it's something they'd be interested in. If there could be any assistance provided there, that would be fantastic.
And there's no
Thank
way
you
that
for
I'm
that.
guaranteeing that.
Oh, I know, of course
I'm
not.
just saying that is one option that needs to be, in my opinion, researched on this project.
I appreciate that. I think that's a very good idea to research that. Mr. Taylor, I think it's a very good idea.
One more inquiry, Mr. Chairman. If I understood you, Mr. LaCory, to say that if we gave him 90 days, if we stuck by the 90-day order, he doesn't have the money to purchase or rent the equipment to remove this debris in 90 days?
That is correct, Mr. Carswell. I understand he would not be able to have the money to be able to rent the equipment to be able to get the job done and to get the debris removed properly.
What's our guarantee that he's going to be able to do it after 91 days?
Well, it's a poor lawyer who sits up and says there's any guarantee, right? All I can tell you is this is what I've pressed my client on, and he's told me that he can get done.
Okay.
And so that is my request, but of course, I cannot give a total guarantee.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Alan's a great attorney, and I respect what he said, but I'll be perfectly candid. He hadn't been able to afford it up to this point. I don't see it changing, whether it's 3 months or 5 months. JR said that, you know, we do have the legal leg to stand on. You know, I don't want to be sitting here 5 months from now with these same folks that show up that are having to look at this eyesore for that length of time. And so, to me, I would stick with upholding our hardworking building inspectors' opinions. And, you know, they've been over backwards to work with them, and it's not been reflected. So, my opinion is I would stick with the rule.
Any other comments? All right, gentlemen, you've heard all the discussion. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I move to uphold the building inspector's ruling and uphold the requirement deadline of May 30th to 2021 for the owners to comply with the condemnation order for case file 072-19.
All right, thank you, Scott. All in favor of that, signify by the uplifted hand. Those opposed? Be 3-2. Thank you. All right, this brings us to item number 11, reports and comments. We'll start way back there in the corner with Ms. Morgan. Any comments for the board tonight?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the last meeting of commissioners on March 16th, I have reviewed a proposed purchase agreement and completed title searches and preparation for closing on 3 tracts of property in eastern Burke County that the county wishes to acquire. Closing is scheduled for Friday, and there's a possibility that we could still make that deadline, but the owner of the property is hospitalized right now, and that's put a kink into our plans. I have also prepared documents and reviewed materials concerning the sale of 115 Wamsutta Mill Road to Silcondo LLC that is now scheduled for April 30th, 2021. I've responded to their questions and requests for further information from Purchasers Council. Taken part in a settlement of claims by the Board of Elections to bonuses and hazard pay that was successfully concluded. I am researching and title searching a property in Jonas Ridge Township that the county is interested in acquiring. I have reviewed potential litigation documents that came in this week concerning the county. I am working with community development concerning some properties along the Fonta Flora Trail that the county wishes to acquire. I've engaged in research projects concerning sale of property by local public entities, alcohol hours for local public entities, abilities to amend the animal services ordinance, and given my recommendation there. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, J.R. Lance?
Nothing from me, Mr. Chairman. Just want to say it's a privilege to be here with you all.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
No comments, thank you.
Mr. Abley?
No comments, thank you.
Commissioner Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, just a couple, I wanted to report a couple of things. And number one is, in addition to my regular appointments and the minutes of those meetings are attached, of course, but also attended the Texas Fish Camp reopening ribbon cutting. Also, and this is, maybe you were going to say this, Mr. Chairman, but just wanted to point out to the board that Partners Mental Health is really growing, and they're adding 3 counties, Cabarrus, Union, and Stanley, I believe. So they're kind of circling Mecklenburg. So I think that's kind of interesting, to say the least. And I believe that's all the comment I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Mr. Vice Chair?
Mr. Chair.
And Mr. Carter?
No comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I do concur with you, Commissioner Taylor. The Partners Behavioral Health is growing, and I think that speaks highly of the work that they've been doing. These other counties are seeing the success that Partners have had, and the difficulty that they've had with the providers in their areas, and so they have asked and been allowed to make a move, and so Partners is doing that, and we have others who are considering requests along those lines as well. So I concur with you. Let me also say, I did mention earlier that Lance is taking care of us tonight, and thank you again, Lance, for that. Madam Clerk is with her mother, and she would appreciate your prayers for her mother and some medical matters that she's dealing with at this time. I'll make a few courtesy reminders tonight. May the 4th, our pre-agenda meeting will be 3 o'clock here in our meeting room. May 4th recess meeting. Also, that'll be a recess meeting at 4 p.m. May the 18th regular meeting, 6 p.m. In this room. May 25th, a budget meeting scheduled. Gentlemen, remember that here in this room. May the 27th, also a scheduled budget meeting. Reminder, on May 31st, our offices will be closed in observance of Memorial Day. Then June 1st, pre-agenda meeting, 3 o'clock here. remind you to spay and neuter your pets, adopt or foster a pet from Animal Services. And again, would remind you to please pick up litter throughout the county. If you're out and about along the roadways, don't get run over, but pick up some litter when you can. This time I'll recognize Lance again for vacancy announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We have the following opportunities for citizens to get involved on boards and committees: the Adult Care and Nursing Home Community Advisory Committees, Council on Aging, Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, City of Morganton Board of Adjustment and Planning Board for the ETJ, Burke Senior Center Advisory Council, the Recreation Commission, the Western Piedmont Community College Board of Trustees, and the Child Protection and Child Fatality Prevention Team.
Thank you again, Lance, and let me encourage you, citizens, to take a look at those vacancies. If there's something you can do to help on these boards and commissions who have vacancies, please consider giving some of your time to help those different groups. Any need for closed session tonight, Mr. Manager? We have no need for closed session. For that, then I'll entertain a motion and remind you again that we do have a need to recess, and we'll have a recess meeting to hear one item that we were not able to act on. My memory is failing me as to what that item is. Do you remember, Lance or Mr. Manager?
I believe that's going to be the minute extract for the CDBG water project that Aaron presented this evening.
Okay. All right, so just be reminded of that as well. So I entertain a motion to recess to May 4th at 4 p.m.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. I believe that's all of us. Thank you, gentlemen.